Well, welcome to our Saturday edition, and today I want to look at some of the history of Lent. Lent, of course, is a time set aside for fasting, prayer, reflection and preparation to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. Lent has been dated back to the 2nd century. Lent traditions and practices have evolved over time, and in recent years, Lent has had a renewal of interest and practice by a whole range of people, including evangelicals. Historians generally agree that the 40-day period before Easter, known as Lent, emerged shortly after the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Earliest observances of Lent seem to have come before that and have focused on fasting. The actual 40-day period varied from region to region, including, in some cases, weekends, in some cases fasting on Sundays, and others not. But in every case, the fast was strict, and it was involving one meal a day after 3 p.m, with no meat, no fish, and no dairy. It was Pope Gregory I in 590 who finally regularised the period of the fast church-wide, to begin on Wednesday, Ash Wednesday, 46 days before Easter, with a ceremony of the Ash, and it didn't include Sundays, which of course were the ongoing days of celebrating Jesus' resurrection. The early church father Irenaeus, he lived in from 130 to year 202 AD, in a letter to Pope Victor, mentioned a dispute, and Irenaeus said that variation in observance did not originate in our own day, but very much earlier, in the time of our forefathers. Irenaeus himself was a third generation Christian from the disciples, and the dating of Lenten observance, he said, goes back to our forefathers, which would have been very early in the history of the church. Eventually, the one meal restriction was lifted altogether, and new practices emerged, like giving up some luxury as a personal sacrifice for Lent. Over time, giving something up became the centrepiece of Lent. Then, after the Protestant Reformation, there were some Protestant churches that observed Lent, like the Lutherans, but Calvin was very much against Lent. He claimed that there was no scriptural basis for it, and he condemned Lent as man's tradition and a works-based vanity. In 1536, John Calvin wrote that Lenten practices were not a true imitation of Christ. Calvin argued that Jesus taught no specific times of fasting, and he said, Lent was therefore merely false zeal, replete with superstition, which set up a fast under the title and pretext of imitating Christ. And of course, Charles Spurgeon was very much against Lent also. In 1885, he wrote, it is as much our duty to reject the traditions of men as it is to observe the ordinances of the Lord. Well, all these people spoke into a particular historical context, and they were anxious about some of the aspects of Lent. The idea that we might be able to impress God by our fasting, or a works-based salvation, all of which is to be rejected. But I think we live in a historical context where works-based ideas is more subtle, but it's not seen in Lent, and so we can be a little bit more relaxed. Practice Lent, and if it's helpful, do it. If it's not helpful in helping us celebrate Easter and the resurrection, then there's no point in doing it. So Lent has continued to evolve, but over the years Lent became less strict in almost every Western tradition. In the Catholic Church, for example, the number of fasting days went from 6 days a week to 3, then eventually just to 2, and in the whole season of Lent, which was Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. The well-known Fish Friday tradition began in the United States in 1966, when the Pope affirmed the abstinence from flesh on Fridays. In every tradition, however, the act of giving something up remained strong. For all these changes, though, the tradition of Lent is still largely recognisable from what it was nearly 2,000 years ago. In recent years, Lent has resurged as an important practice in mainline churches. In a time that some call the post-Christian era, many evangelicals have gained a new appreciation for the season, to reflect on their need for the cross and to prepare their hearts to celebrate Christ's resurrection. For all faithful observers, Lent is about Jesus and what he did. Eric Ferris, who founded an organisation called the Lent Experience, wrote, "You could observe 1,000 Lents and it won't ever accomplish in your life what the cross has." And of course that is so true. It is the cross, and Lent is, I believe, an opportunity for us to examine ourselves, to reflect on the cross and to be filled with hope of the resurrection. So whether Christians observe Lent or not, what really matters is our embrace of Christ crucified and the empty tomb. I'll see you tomorrow in church at 9:30, and I hope you could join us all through the week and next Saturday when Father Greg Kennedy will be sharing a little about his thoughts and his practices of Lent. Bye for now.